If you were born before 1970, if you are currently in your mid-50s, your 60s, or your 70s, I need you to watch this entire video before this month wraps up because new regulations taking effect in August 2026 are directly transforming how driving privileges, vehicle licensing requirements, and road safety assessments are handled for individuals in precisely these age groups. And the changes are not the same across all three groups. What applies to someone born in the 1950s differs from what applies to someone born in the 1960s, and differs once again from someone born even earlier. That is exactly why the majority of general driving rule videos out there are failing to give you the full picture. This video is going to walk through what August's new regulations mean specifically for your birth generation, what action each group must take before the relevant deadlines slip away, and what happens to your driving privileges if you simply do nothing and wait for a letter that may never arrive. Please pass this along to every person in your household or extended family who was born before 1970, before they miss something they cannot recover. Because the window to act on certain parts of what I'm about to cover is measured in days and weeks, not months, I want to be completely transparent about what is genuinely on the line here. There are senior drivers born in the 1950s who are sitting on unprocessed license renewal applications that have been in a suspended administrative status for several months, simply because no one told them that new verification documentation was required before those renewals could be finalized. There are individuals born in the 1960s who are unknowingly approaching a medical fitness assessment deadline that will automatically trigger a license restriction if they miss it. Not because they chose to ignore it, but because no one explained that a new August regulation changed the notification procedure their state uses to alert them. And there are drivers born in the 1940s and early 1950s who have been on the road for decades and who are about to miss a vision and reaction time reassessment window that would have allowed them to keep their full unrestricted license, simply because the window quietly closed while they were still waiting for someone to sit down and explain what the new rules actually require of them. Every single one of these outcomes is entirely preventable. This video exists so that none of them happen to you. By the time this video ends, you are going to have a clear understanding of what the new August driving regulations mean for each of the three birth groups: those born in the 1940s and early 1950s, those born in the mid to late 1950s, and those born in the 1960s, along with the specific action each group needs to take without delay. I'm going to walk through all three groups in a clear and organized way, but I want you to stay through the section addressing people born in the 1960s in particular, because that group is facing the most time-sensitive deadline of the three, and the one where failing to act produces the most permanent and far-reaching consequences for your daily independence and mobility. If you were born in the 1960s or you have a family member who was, that portion of this video alone justifies staying until the very end. Before we go through each individual group, take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel and switch on the bell notification. Driving regulations for senior license holders are shifting more frequently throughout 2026 than they have at any point in recent decades. And when rules are revised at the state and federal level, the relevant agencies mail out a standardized form letter to a general mailing address and move forward without further explanation. Nobody calls to clarify what those changes mean for your particular birth year, your specific license class, or your individual health circumstances. What gets covered on this channel is tracking these regulatory shifts, breaking them down according to who they affect and in what way, and delivering that information while there is still time to respond. Subscribe now, and let us work through all three groups. If you were born in the 1940s or the early 1950s, you are currently somewhere between 73 and 85 years old, and you have been licensed to drive for somewhere between 50 and 65 years, depending on when you originally obtained your license. The August 2026 regulatory change that most directly affects your group involves mandatory medical fitness reassessments and the correction process for long-term license holders whose driving records contain administrative flags stemming from earlier periods that were never properly resolved or closed out. Here is the background context. When drivers in this age group originally renewed their licenses in the late 1990s and the 2000s, the administrative tracking systems many state DMVs relied on had documented data entry limitations and record transfer gaps that in certain cases caused license files to carry unresolved flags, outdated medical certifications, or marginally inaccurate identity verification records. State motor vehicle authorities have been aware of specific categories of these discrepancies for a number of years. What changed in August 2026 is that multiple states put into place a new internal review protocol that automatically flags accounts within this birth generation for a records verification process. And when a discrepancy is identified, a written notice is generated and mailed to the license holder on file. Here is where the problem surfaces. Many drivers born in the 1940s and early 1950s have moved since they last updated their license information, have not updated their mailing address with their state DMV, or have family members overseeing their daily affairs who may not recognize an administrative license notice when it turns up in the mailbox. The new August protocol in most participating states generates a 60-day response window beginning from the date the notice is formally issued. If no response arrives within that window, the review process is closed, and the license record is flagged as reviewed with no response recorded, which in several states triggers an automatic downgrade from a full unrestricted license to a restricted license, requiring additional conditions before the driver can operate a vehicle without limitation. If you were born in the 1940s or early 1950s, the steps you need to take immediately are twofold. First, contact your State Department of Motor Vehicles directly, either through their online portal or by phone, and verify that your current mailing address and all contact details on file are accurate and fully up to date. Second, ask the representative explicitly whether your license account has been flagged under the August 2026 Senior Driver Records Review Protocol, and whether any notice has already been generated and mailed out to you. If a notice has been issued and you were never aware of it, request that it be reissued to your current address and confirm the start date of your 60-day response window from that newly issued date. Do not assume your information on file is current. Do not assume that receiving no correspondence means no review is pending. A single phone call or online portal check could uncover a license restriction that has been administratively generated inside the system and that is waiting on a response that never came. Catching it now, before that 60-day window closes, is the difference between keeping your full unrestricted driving privileges and facing a restriction that requires an entirely new set of steps to undo. Steps that can take weeks or months, and that in some states require a formal hearing before a license review board. The other change affecting this specific group under the August 2026 rules involves mandatory vision reassessment scheduling. Several states that previously conducted vision screenings only at the point of in-person renewal have now moved to a proactive outreach model for drivers aged 75 and above. Under this model, Drivers in this age range who have not completed an in-office vision screening within the past 24 months are being sent scheduling notices with a required response window. Missing that response window does not immediately revoke a license in most states, but it does place the license in a conditional status that prevents renewal and that requires a completed vision assessment before any further license transaction can be processed. If your license comes up for renewal before that vision assessment is completed, the renewal will be administratively blocked. Understanding this? Before your renewal date is what allows you to schedule the assessment proactively on your own terms, rather than discovering the block when you are already standing at the DMV counter. If you were born in the mid to late 1950s, you are currently somewhere between 66 and 72 years old, which means you are either recently retired, actively managing a schedule that still depends heavily on personal vehicle use, or entering the phase of life where maintaining your driving independence becomes an increasingly meaningful part of your overall quality of life and financial planning. The August 2026 regulatory change that most directly affects people born in the mid to late 1950s is the revised implementation of the Senior Driver Medical Certification Renewal Program, specifically the acceleration of medical fitness verification processing for license holders in this birth generation who hold licenses with existing medical condition endorsements or restrictions tied to conditions reported in previous renewal cycles. Here is the background. If at any point during your driving history you disclosed a medical condition during a license renewal, whether that was a cardiovascular condition, a neurological condition, a vision impairment, a hearing impairment, or any ongoing condition that required documentation from a treating physician, that disclosure created a medical file flag in your state DMV record. Under the previous process, the reassessment of that flag happened only at scheduled renewal intervals, typically every 4 to 6 years, depending on the state. Under the August 2026 updated protocol, the reassessment cycle for drivers born in the mid to late 1950s who have existing medical file flags has been shortened significantly in most participating states, moving from a renewal cycle-based schedule to an age-triggered schedule that initiates a new certification requirement at specific age milestones, regardless of when the last renewal occurred. What this means in practical terms is that if you turn 67, 68, or 69 between now and the end of 2026, and you have a medical condition flag in your DMV record, a new medical certification requirement may have been triggered by your birthday, and the documentation request may already have been mailed to whatever address your state has on file for you. The new August protocol in most participating states generates a 90-day window from the date the documentation request is issued, during which you must submit updated certification from your treating physician. If no documentation arrives within that window, the license is administratively downgraded to a restricted status until the certification is received and processed. This is where the urgency becomes very real for this specific group. A significant number of drivers born in the mid to late 1950s who have medical condition flags in their records are not aware that the August 2026 rule change shortened their reassessment cycle. They believe they are current because they completed their last renewal properly and received no indication at that time that anything additional was required. And that belief is accurate based on the rules as they existed before August. Under the updated rules, the renewal cycle alone no longer determines when certification is required. The age milestone triggers it independently of the renewal schedule. Contact your state DMV directly and ask whether your license file contains any medical condition flags and whether any documentation requests have been issued to you under the August 2026 Age-Triggered Reassessment Protocol. If a request has been generated and you are unaware of it, ask for the window to be confirmed from the date of your inquiry and request that updated documentation requirements be sent directly to your current address. Then contact your primary care physician or treating specialist and schedule the necessary certification documentation as quickly as your calendar allows. The 90-day window sounds generous, but the combination of scheduling medical appointments, completing the required forms, having them properly authorized, and submitting them through the correct DMV channel means the actual usable time is considerably shorter than it appears. There is a second element of the August 2026 changes that affects this group specifically, and that has received very little coverage in general news and information channels. Several states have introduced a new voluntary senior driver refresher course credit program for drivers in this age range. Under this program, completing an approved defensive driving or senior driver refresher course of at least 6 hours earns a credit in your license file that extends your renewal cycle by 12 to 24 months, reduces your auto insurance premium in participating states under agreements between the DMV and major insurance carriers, and in states with point systems, reduces or eliminates minor accumulated points from your driving record. The program is entirely voluntary, and the courses are available both in person at community centers, senior centers, and driving schools, and online through approved providers. The credit application requires only a course completion certificate submitted to your state DMV, either online or by mail. The reason this matters enough to mention in the same breath as the more urgent compliance deadlines is straightforward. The financial value of the insurance premium reduction alone, which in participating states averages between 5 and 15% of annual premium, combined with the administrative benefits of the extended renewal cycle, means that a 6-hour online course can produce hundreds of dollars of tangible benefit over the following 2 to 3 years. The course is not free in most cases, but the cost is typically between $25 and $40, making the return on that investment substantial. And for drivers who are managing the additional documentation requirements triggered by the August 2026 medical flag reassessment, having an active refresher course credit in the file can also favorably influence how discretionary aspects of the administrative review are handled. If you were born in the 1960s, you are currently somewhere between 56 and 65 years old, and the August 2026 regulatory change affecting your group carries the most time-sensitive and permanently consequential implications of all 3 birth generations covered in this video. This is the section I told you to stay for. People born in the 1960s are either approaching the age range where senior driver regulations first begin to apply to them, or have only very recently entered it, and the August 2026 rule introduces a new pre-assessment notification requirement that changes the manner and timing by which state DMVs must inform you of your options before any age-triggered driving assessment is scheduled or processed. Under the previous process, a substantial number of drivers in this age group entered the senior driver assessment phase, without ever being shown a clear explanation of what the process involves, what the possible outcomes are, what their rights are during the assessment, and what options exist if they disagree with an outcome. The new August regulation requires DMV representatives and contracted assessment agencies to deliver this information in written form before scheduling any new age-triggered assessment for someone born in the 1960s. Here is why this carries such urgency right now. If you are turning 65 in 2026, you are entering the age threshold at which proactive senior driver notification requirements kick in under the new August rules in most participating states. The notification itself is benign. It is not a restriction or a suspension. It is an informational communication that explains what age-triggered assessment options exist, what your rights are in the process, and what voluntary programs are available that can help you document your driving fitness proactively in a way that actually strengthens your license file, rather than creating administrative uncertainty. But here is what makes it time-sensitive. The August 2026 rule also introduced a 45-day voluntary response window tied to this initial notification. Within that window, you can complete a voluntary fitness documentation submission that is treated as a proactive record, meaning it satisfies the assessment requirement for a defined period and keeps your license file in a fully clear status without any conditional flags. Miss that 45-day window, and the proactive option closes. The assessment requirement remains, but it shifts from a voluntary proactive format to a scheduled mandatory format that operates on the DMV's timeline rather than yours. The practical difference between those two formats is significant. In the proactive voluntary format, you choose your physician, you choose the timing, you complete the documentation on a schedule that works for your life, and you submit it as a positive record that demonstrates your fitness. In the scheduled mandatory format, you receive a notice with a fixed appointment date at a state-contracted facility. The assessment is conducted according to a standardized protocol, and any borderline finding is processed through the standard administrative review system, which in most states involves a waiting period, a review board evaluation, and a potential temporary restriction while the review is ongoing. Understanding this distinction and acting within the 45-day voluntary window is what keeps you in control of the process, rather than handing control of it to an administrative timeline that operates without regard for your individual circumstances. If you have received or are about to receive a senior driver notification from your state DMV and you were born in the 1960s, contact your state DMV immediately and ask specifically about the August 2026 Voluntary Proactive Fitness Documentation option and the 45-day window associated with the initial notification. Then, contact your primary care physician and schedule the required documentation visit before that window closes. There is one more element of the August 2026 changes that applies across all three groups, and that deserves direct attention before the summary, because it is the element that catches the most people off guard, precisely because it seems administrative rather than substantive. Across most participating states, the August 2026 package of senior driver regulations also introduced updated photo identification and identity verification requirements for all license renewals submitted by drivers aged 60 and above. The updated requirements reflect the real ID compliance standards that have been in effect nationally, but that a significant number of states have only now fully integrated into their senior license renewal process. What this means practically is that if your license comes up for renewal between now and the end of 2026, and you are 60 or older, you will be required to present a more extensive set of identity documents at your in-person renewal appointment than was required at your last renewal. Specifically, most states are now requiring original or certified copies of your birth certificate or a valid U.S. passport, proof of Social Security number, and 2 documents establishing your current residential address. If you arrive at your renewal appointment without the correct documentation, the renewal will be postponed, and you will be required to schedule a second appointment, creating a gap period during which your license may technically expire, depending on how close to your expiration date the first appointment occurred. Knowing this before your renewal date is what allows you to gather the required documents at your leisure, rather than discovering the requirement at the counter with your expiration date approaching. Here is the consolidated picture for all three groups. If you were born in the 1940s or the early 1950s, contact your state DMV today and verify that your mailing address on file is current. Then ask whether your license has been flagged under the August 2026 Senior Driver Records Review Protocol and whether any notice has already been generated and mailed out. A 60-day response window may already be actively counting down on a notice you never received. Also ask whether you are due for a proactive vision reassessment under the new age-triggered scheduling model. Catching both of these before deadlines expire keeps your full unrestricted license intact and your driving independence protected. If you were born in the mid to late 1950s, contact your state DMV today and ask specifically whether your license file contains any medical condition flags and whether any documentation requests have been issued under the August 2026 Age-Triggered Reassessment Protocol. If documentation has been requested and you were unaware of it, confirm your response window and contact your physician immediately to begin the certification process. Also look into the Voluntary Senior Driver Refresher Course credit program available in your state. The financial and administrative benefits of completing that course before your next renewal are substantial and the process is straightforward. And if you were born in the 1960s, take the following in clearly. If you have received or are about to receive a senior driver notification from your state DMV, the 45-day voluntary proactive fitness documentation window gives you a genuine opportunity to complete that process on your own terms before it becomes a scheduled mandatory assessment on the DMV's timeline. Contact your state DMV to confirm the window dates and contact your physician to schedule the required documentation visit before the window closes. Also gather the updated identity verification documents required under the new Real ID-aligned renewal process before your next license renewal appointment, so you are not caught short at the counter. 3 birth generations, 3 distinct August regulatory changes, 3 separate actions that need to happen right now before deadlines expire, and available options close permanently. If you were born in the 1940s or early 1950s, call your state DMV today to verify your address and check for pending records review notices. If you were born in the mid to late 1950s, call today to confirm whether medical condition flags exist in your file and whether certification documentation has been requested. And if you were born in the 1960s, find out whether your 45-day voluntary proactive documentation window is currently open and act within it before it closes and the process shifts to a mandatory scheduled format. Please share this video right now with every member of your family and your circle who was born before 1970, because each of these 3 groups has something specific and genuinely time-sensitive to act on this month. A single phone call to your state DMV could preserve driving privileges that an unnoticed administrative flag is quietly threatening. Disclaimer: this video is created purely for educational and informational purposes only. The content presented here reflects personal opinions and observations gathered from publicly available sources including YouTube, Google, news outlets, and other online platforms. This is not professional legal, medical, or regulatory advice. Driving laws, DMV requirements, and senior driver regulations vary significantly by state and jurisdiction, and are subject to change. Always verify current requirements directly with your State Department of Motor Vehicles or a qualified professional before making any decisions related to your driving privileges or license status. The creators of this video make no guarantees regarding the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the information presented, and accept no liability for decisions made based on the content of this video.